In the middle of a crowded afternoon at a downtown bus station, Ethan Carter noticed a young woman standing beside an older man. She looked about 20, her posture stiff, her eyes avoiding everyone. Nothing seemed wrong at first glance. Then her hand moved. She tucked her thumb into her palm and folded her 4 fingers over it. A silent signal. A cry for help without words. Ethan knew that gesture. He had taught it to his own daughter. Now he faced a choice that could destroy an innocent man's life, or save a woman from disappearing forever. Ethan Carter had worked at the Greyhound station on 5th and Monroe for almost 3 years. It was not the kind of job people talked about at parties. He loaded luggage, helped passengers find their platforms, and sometimes drove the shuttle van when someone called in sick. The pay was modest, but the hours allowed him to drop his daughter off at school in the morning and pick her up by 4 in the afternoon. That was all that mattered to him now. He was 35 years old, though some days he felt closer to 50. His wife, Sarah, had died in a car accident when Lucy was only 3. A drunk driver ran a red light on a Tuesday evening, and just like that, Ethan became a single father. He did not talk about it much. The grief had settled into something quieter over the years, a weight he carried without complaint. His whole life now revolved around his daughter. Everything he did, every decision he made, came back to one question. Was Lucy safe? That question had led him down some unexpected paths. 2 years ago, he had watched a documentary about missing persons cases, and something in it had shaken him deeply. The show featured a segment about a hand signal that abuse victims could use to silently ask for help. A person would hold up their hand, with the thumb tucked into the palm, then fold the 4 fingers down over it. The gesture looked almost casual, like someone stretching their hand or making a fist. But to those who knew, it meant one thing. I am in danger. I need help. I cannot speak freely. Ethan had taught Lucy the signal that same week. She was only 6 at the time, and he worried about scaring her. But he explained it simply. He told her that if she ever felt unsafe and could not talk, she could make this sign, and someone who understood would help her. They practiced it together a few times, turning it into a kind of secret code between them. Lucy thought it was like being a spy. Ethan hoped she would never need to use it. The afternoon of November 17th started like any other. The station was busy with the usual mix of travelers, college students heading home for Thanksgiving break, elderly couples visiting family, a few people who looked like they were running from something, though Ethan had learned not to ask. He moved through the crowd with a cart of luggage, his eyes scanning faces out of habit. After 5 years of raising a daughter alone, he had developed a kind of radar for trouble. He noticed things other people missed, the way a child flinched when an adult raised their voice, the hollow look in someone's eyes that meant they had not slept in days. That was why he noticed the young woman near platform 7. She stood beside a man who looked about 45, with a thick neck and a leather jacket that seemed too expensive for the bus station. The woman was young, maybe 20 or 21, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and a gray sweatshirt that was too big for her. At first glance, they could have been father and daughter, or maybe an older boyfriend and his girlfriend. Nothing obviously wrong. But Ethan kept watching. The woman's posture was rigid, her shoulders pulled up toward her ears like she was bracing for something. Her eyes moved constantly, scanning the crowd. But whenever someone looked directly at her, she dropped her gaze to the floor. The man beside her had one hand resting on her lower back, not affectionately, possessively, like he was steering her, making sure she did not drift away. Ethan told himself he was imagining things. He had become paranoid since Sarah died, seeing danger in every shadow. This was probably nothing. The woman was an adult. She could walk away if she wanted to. He started to push his cart toward the baggage claim area, forcing himself to look away. Then the woman's hand moved. It happened quickly, almost casually, while the man turned to check the departure board. She raised her right hand to about chest level, tucked her thumb into her palm, and folded her 4 fingers over it. The gesture lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then her hand dropped back to her side. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. He stopped walking. The cart rolled forward a few inches and bumped into a trash can. A few people glanced at him, but he did not notice. His eyes were locked on the young woman. She was looking directly at him now, and in that moment, everything else in the station seemed to fade away. The noise of the crowd, the announcements over the loudspeaker, the smell of diesel and fast food, all of it disappeared. There was only her face and the desperate plea in her eyes. She had seen him watching. She had made the signal on purpose. She was asking him for help. The man in the leather jacket turned back from the departure board and said something to her. Ethan could not hear the words, but he saw the woman flinch almost imperceptibly. She nodded and looked down at the floor again. The man's hand moved from her back to her elbow, gripping it firmly as he guided her toward the row of plastic seats near the platform. Ethan's mind raced. He tried to think clearly, but his thoughts kept colliding with each other. The signal was real. He had seen it with his own eyes. But what did it actually mean? The woman was not a child. She was a grown adult, probably in her early 20s. Maybe she was in an abusive relationship and was too afraid to leave. Maybe she had been coerced into something, or maybe Ethan had misread the situation entirely. Maybe she was just stretching her hand, and he was projecting his own fears onto a stranger. He thought about Lucy. His daughter was 8 years old now, with her mother's brown eyes and her father's stubborn streak. Every morning when he dropped her off at school, Ethan told her the same thing. If something feels wrong, trust your gut. Do not worry about being polite. Do not worry about making a scene. Just get safe first, and we will figure out the rest later. It was the advice he gave her, but he was not sure he could follow it himself. If he was wrong about this woman, the consequences could be severe. He could accuse an innocent man of something terrible. He could humiliate a woman who was just having a bad day. He could lose his job, face harassment charges, maybe even get arrested. The station had cameras everywhere. If he made a scene and it turned out to be nothing, he would be branded as the crazy guy who attacked random passengers. He might never work again. But if he was right, and he did nothing, what then? What if this woman disappeared tonight, loaded onto a bus to somewhere no one would ever find her? What if she ended up dead in a ditch somewhere, and the last person who could have helped her was a coward, who looked away because he was afraid of being embarrassed? Ethan set down his cart. He took a deep breath and watched the man lead the woman to a seat. The man sat down beside her, positioning himself between her and the rest of the station. His body language was clear. She was not going anywhere without going through him first. The woman sat with her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. She did not look at Ethan again. He knew he could not confront them directly. Not yet. He needed more information. He needed to be sure. But he also knew that time was running out. The departure board showed a bus leaving for Chicago in 45 minutes. If the man was planning to take her somewhere, that bus was probably their ride. Ethan made his decision. He was not going to walk away. He was not going to pretend he had not seen what he saw. He would watch them, gather whatever information he could, and find a way to confirm whether the woman was really in danger. If he was wrong, he would apologize and move on. But he would not live with the alternative. He would not spend the rest of his life wondering if he could have saved someone and chose not to. He picked up his cart and moved it to a spot near the coffee kiosk, about 30 feet from where the man and woman sat. From there, he could watch them without being obvious. He pulled out his phone and pretended to check messages, but his eyes kept drifting back to Platform 7. The woman had not moved. The man was scrolling through his own phone, occasionally glancing at her, like a guard watching a prisoner. Ethan thought about Sarah. She would have known what to do. She always knew. She was the one who read the news articles about missing people and got angry. She was the one who donated to organizations that helped trafficking survivors. If she were here now, she would probably already be on the phone with the police, demanding they send someone immediately. But Sarah was gone, and Ethan was alone. And all he had was his gut feeling and a hand signal that might mean everything or nothing at all. He looked at the woman one more time. She was sitting perfectly still, her eyes unfocused, like she had retreated somewhere inside herself, where the man beside her could not reach. In that moment, Ethan saw his daughter. Not literally. The woman looked nothing like Lucy. But he saw the same vulnerability, the same helplessness, the same silent prayer to be noticed by someone who cared enough to act. He was not going to let her down. Whatever it took, whatever the risk, he was going to find out the truth. And if she needed help, he was going to give it. Ethan watched them for another 10 minutes before making his move. The man in the leather jacket had not loosened his grip on the situation. He sat close to the woman, their shoulders almost touching, his body angled to block her from the rest of the station. Every few minutes, he would lean over and whisper something in her ear. Each time, she would nod without looking at him, her expression blank and distant. Ethan knew he needed backup. He could not handle this alone, not without more information. He spotted a security guard near the ticket counter, a heavy-set man in his 50s, with a gray mustache and a bored expression. Ethan had seen him around the station before. His name was Frank, and he spent most of his shifts drinking coffee and watching sports on his phone. But he was still security. He had authority that Ethan did not. Ethan approached him slowly, trying to look casual. Frank glanced up from his phone and raised an eyebrow. Ethan kept his voice low and explained what he had seen. The young woman near Platform 7, the older man controlling her movements, the hand signal that meant she was asking for help. He described it clearly, making sure Frank understood the significance. The tucked thumb, the folded fingers, a distress signal recognized by law enforcement and advocacy groups around the world. Frank listened with the kind of patience that suggested he had heard stories like this before. When Ethan finished, the guard shrugged and said it sounded like a domestic situation. He pointed out that the woman was clearly an adult. She could walk away anytime she wanted. If she was really in trouble, she would say something. She would scream, or run, or ask someone for help directly. The fact that she was sitting quietly next to the guy probably meant they were just having a bad day. Couples fought all the time. It did not mean anything criminal was happening. Ethan tried to push back. He explained that trafficking victims often could not speak freely because they were being watched constantly. The whole point of the silent signal was to ask for help without alerting the abuser, but Frank shook his head and said he could not intervene based on a hand gesture. He needed something concrete, a verbal complaint, visible injuries, something that would hold up if the guy decided to sue the station for harassment. Without that, his hands were tied. Ethan thanked him anyway and walked back toward the coffee kiosk. His chest felt tight with frustration. He had expected resistance, but hearing it out loud made the situation feel even more hopeless. The system was designed to protect people, but it moved too slowly. By the time anyone gathered enough evidence to act, the woman could be gone. He checked the departure board again. The Chicago bus was now leaving in 32 minutes. The man and woman had not moved from their seats, but Ethan noticed something different. The man was checking his watch more frequently, and his posture had shifted from relaxed to alert. He was getting ready to go. Ethan positioned himself closer, pretending to clean up some trash near the vending machines. From this angle, he could see the woman's face more clearly. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying recently. Her lower lip was cracked and dry. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that came from something deeper than missed sleep. When the man leaned over to whisper in her ear again, Ethan saw her flinch. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there. Her whole body tensed like she was bracing for a blow. Then the man grabbed her wrist, not gently, not affectionately. He squeezed it hard enough that Ethan could see the tendons in his forearm flex. The woman's face tightened with pain, but she did not make a sound. She did not pull away. She just sat there, enduring it, like this was something that happened to her all the time. The man leaned close and said something through clenched teeth. Ethan could not hear the words, but the threat in his tone was unmistakable. When he finally let go, there were white marks on the woman's skin where his fingers had been. That was it. That was the confirmation Ethan needed. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a couple having a disagreement. This was control. This was violence. And it was happening right in front of him, in a public space full of people who were too busy with their own lives to notice. Ethan's heart pounded as he tried to figure out his next move. He could not call the police himself. By the time they arrived, the bus would be boarding. He could not physically restrain the man without risking a fight he might not win. The guy was bigger than him, and probably more willing to use force. Ethan had not been in a real fight since high school. He was not confident in his chances. But he could not just stand there and watch them leave. He had to do something. He had to at least try. He stepped out from behind the vending machines and walked directly toward Platform 7. The man saw him coming and immediately stiffened. His eyes narrowed, tracking Ethan's approach like a predator sizing up a potential threat. The woman looked up too, and for a split second, Ethan saw hope flicker across her face. Then it disappeared, replaced by fear. Ethan stopped about 6 feet away and addressed the woman directly. He asked if she was okay. He kept his voice calm and friendly, like he was just a concerned bystander making conversation. The woman opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, the man cut in. He stood up and positioned himself between Ethan and the woman, blocking her from view. The man's voice was smooth and practiced. He explained that his girlfriend was fine. She was just tired from traveling. They had been on the road for 2 days, and she got anxious in crowded places. He appreciated the concern, but everything was under control. His tone was polite, almost charming, but his eyes told a different story. They were cold and hard, warning Ethan to back off. Ethan did not back off. He leaned to the side, trying to make eye contact with the woman again. He asked her directly if she wanted him to call someone for her, a friend, a family member, anyone she trusted. The man stepped sideways to block his view again and said that was not necessary. His girlfriend did not need some stranger getting involved in their personal business. He suggested that Ethan mind his own affairs before someone got the wrong idea about his intentions. The confrontation was starting to draw attention. A few passengers nearby had stopped what they were doing and were watching the exchange. Ethan saw a station manager in a blue vest approaching from the direction of the ticket counter. The manager was a thin man with glasses and a clipboard, and he looked annoyed rather than concerned. The manager asked what was going on. The man in the leather jacket immediately shifted his demeanor. He became apologetic and slightly embarrassed. He explained that this gentleman seemed to think his girlfriend was in some kind of trouble, but it was just a misunderstanding. They were having a rough trip, and his girlfriend got emotional sometimes. He gestured toward the woman, who was still sitting with her head down, not making eye contact with anyone. The manager turned to Ethan and asked if there was a problem. Ethan tried to explain about the hand signal, but even as the words left his mouth, he realized how thin it sounded. A hand gesture, a gut feeling, no concrete evidence, no verbal complaint from the woman herself. The manager's expression shifted from annoyance to skepticism. He told Ethan that he could not have employees harassing passengers based on hunches. If the woman was an adult and was not asking for help, there was nothing anyone could do. He suggested that Ethan get back to work before this became an HR issue. The man in the leather jacket smiled at Ethan. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew he had won. He put his hand on the woman's shoulder and told her it was time to go. They were going to wait for the bus outside, where it was quieter. He helped her to her feet, keeping one hand firmly on her elbow, and guided her toward the exit that led to the parking lot. Ethan watched them go, his stomach churning with helplessness. The manager gave him a warning look and walked away. The other passengers lost interest and went back to their phones and conversations. In less than a minute, it was like nothing had happened at all. But Ethan could not let it end like this. He followed them at a distance, staying far enough back that the man would not notice. The parking lot was half empty, with buses lined up along the far side, and a few cars scattered near the entrance. The man led the woman toward a dark blue sedan parked in the corner, away from the main lights. He opened the passenger door and gestured for her to get in. This was it. Once she was in that car, she was gone. Ethan would never see her again. No one would. He thought about Lucy. He thought about the promise he had made to himself when Sarah died. He would protect his daughter from everything he could not protect his wife from. He would teach her to be careful, to be aware, to trust her instincts. But what good were those lessons if he could not follow them himself? What kind of father told his daughter to be brave while he stood in a parking lot and watched a woman get taken away? Ethan made his choice. He walked toward the car, not caring anymore if the man saw him. His footsteps echoed on the asphalt. The man heard him coming and turned around, his face twisting with anger. He told Ethan to back off. He said if Ethan took one more step, he would call the cops and have him arrested for stalking. He reached into his jacket pocket, and for a terrifying moment, Ethan thought he was going for a weapon. But Ethan did not stop. He walked past the man and spoke directly to the woman, who was standing frozen beside the open car door. His voice was loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. He told her that if she was in danger, she should make the signal again. Right now, in front of everyone. He told her that he had seen it before, and he knew what it meant. He told her that he would not leave until he knew she was safe. The man grabbed Ethan's shoulder and spun him around. His face was inches away, his breath hot and sour. He said Ethan was making a huge mistake. He said there would be consequences for this. He said things that Ethan barely heard because his attention was focused entirely on the woman behind him. She was trembling. Her whole body shook like she was standing in freezing wind. Her eyes darted between Ethan and the man, filled with terror and something else. Something that looked like a question, like she was asking herself whether this stranger could really help her, or whether trusting him would only make things worse. Then she raised her hand, slowly, deliberately. She tucked her thumb into her palm and folded her forefingers over it. The same signal. The same silent cry for help. But this time, she held it up where everyone could see. She held it up and did not let go. The man saw it too. His face went pale. He released Ethan's shoulder and took a step back, suddenly uncertain. A woman walking to her car nearby had stopped to watch. A bus driver leaning against his vehicle was reaching for his phone. The situation had changed. What had been private was now public. What had been deniable was now undeniable. Ethan looked at the woman and told her she was going to be okay. He did not know if it was true, but he said it anyway. Then he turned to face the man, putting himself between them, and waited for whatever came next. The parking lot erupted into chaos within seconds. The woman who had been walking to her car started shouting for someone to call 911. The bus driver was already on his phone, speaking rapidly to an emergency dispatcher. More people emerged from the station, drawn by the commotion. The man in the leather jacket looked around wildly, calculating his options. His eyes landed on the dark blue sedan, and Ethan saw the decision form on his face before he moved. The man lunged for the driver's side door. Ethan reacted on instinct, throwing himself forward and grabbing the man's arm before he could reach the handle. They struggled for a moment, grappling awkwardly against the side of the car. The man was stronger than Ethan expected, and he landed a sharp elbow to Ethan's ribs that sent pain shooting through his chest. But Ethan held on. He wrapped both arms around the man's torso and refused to let go, even as they stumbled backward and nearly fell. The bus driver reached them first. He was a big man, well over 6 feet, with the kind of build that came from decades of manual labor. He grabbed the man in the leather jacket by the collar and yanked him away from Ethan with one powerful motion. The man tried to swing at him, but the driver blocked the punch easily and pinned him against the side of the sedan. 2 more passengers rushed over to help hold him down. Within moments, the man was immobilized, his face pressed against the car's hood, his arms twisted behind his back. Ethan stepped away, breathing hard. His ribs throbbed where the elbow had connected, and his hands were shaking with adrenaline. but he was not focused on himself. He turned to look for the woman. She had collapsed. She was sitting on the asphalt beside the open passenger door, her knees drawn up to her chest, her whole body convulsing with sobs. The sounds that came from her were raw and broken, the kind of crying that had been held inside for too long. Ethan approached her slowly, keeping his voice soft. He told her she was safe now. He told her no one was going to hurt her anymore. He did not try to touch her or get too close. He just knelt a few feet away and let her know he was there. The police arrived 7 minutes later. 2 cruisers pulled into the parking lot with their lights flashing, followed by an unmarked sedan. Officers swarmed the scene, separating everyone involved and taking preliminary statements. The man in the leather jacket was handcuffed and placed in the back of one of the cruisers. He did not resist, but his eyes burned with hatred as he stared at Ethan through the window. Ethan met his gaze and did not look away. A female officer approached the woman and helped her to her feet. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and guided her toward the unmarked sedan, where 2 people in plain clothes were waiting. Ethan later learned they were detectives from a specialized unit that handled human trafficking cases. They had been tracking this particular network for months, but had never been able to catch anyone in the act. Until now. The woman's name was Emily. She was 20 years old, originally from a small town in Ohio. 3 months ago, she had responded to an online job posting for a modeling agency in California. The opportunity seemed legitimate. They had a professional website, glowing testimonials, and an office address in Los Angeles. Emily had dreams of becoming a model since she was a teenager, and this felt like her chance. She bought a bus ticket and headed west, telling her parents she would call them when she arrived. She never made it to California. The people who met her at the bus station in Nevada were not modeling agents. They took her phone, her wallet, and her identification. They moved her from motel to motel, never staying in one place for more than a few days. They told her she owed them money for transportation, housing, and food. They told her she would have to work off the debt before she could leave. They told her that if she tried to run or contact the police, they would find her family and make them pay instead. Emily spent 3 months trapped in that nightmare. She was forced to do things she could not bring herself to describe. She was beaten when she disobeyed and starved when she resisted. The man in the leather jacket was one of her handlers, responsible for moving her from one location to another. He was taking her to Chicago, where she would be sold to another group. She did not know what would happen to her after that. She did not want to know. She had learned the hand signal from another girl in the network, someone who had seen it on social media before she was taken. They practiced it together in secret, hoping that someday one of them would have the chance to use it. The other girl was moved to a different location 2 weeks ago. Emily did not know where she was or if she was still alive, but she remembered the signal. And when she saw Ethan watching her in the bus station, something in his eyes told her he might understand. The police interviewed Ethan for over an hour. They asked him to describe everything he had seen, from the first moment he noticed Emily to the confrontation in the parking lot. He told them about the hand signal, about his attempts to alert security, about the station manager who dismissed his concerns. He told them about Lucy and why he had taught his daughter the same gesture. The detectives listened carefully, taking notes and asking follow-up questions. When he finished, one of them shook his hand and told him that his actions had probably saved Emily's life. The investigation expanded rapidly over the following days. Emily's testimony led the police to several locations where other victims were being held. They arrested 6 more people connected to the trafficking network, including the woman who had posed as a modeling recruiter online. Federal authorities got involved, and the case was eventually transferred to the FBI. Emily was placed in a victim protection program and given access to counseling, medical care, and legal support. Her parents flew in from Ohio to be with her. Their reunion was private, but Ethan heard later that her mother had cried for 3 hours straight. The station manager who had told Ethan to stop harassing passengers was placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. Frank, the security guard who had dismissed Ethan's concerns, quietly resigned 2 weeks later. The Greyhound Company issued a statement saying they were committed to training their staff to recognize signs of human trafficking and respond appropriately. Ethan did not know if anything would actually change, but at least people were talking about it. He returned to work after a few days off. His co-workers treated him differently now. Some of them looked at him with respect. Others seemed uncomfortable, like they were not sure what to say to someone who had done something they knew they never would have done themselves. Ethan did not care about any of it. He just wanted to get back to his routine. He wanted to pick up his daughter from school and cook her dinner and help her with her homework. He wanted to feel normal again. But normal felt different now. When he looked at the crowds moving through the station, he saw them with new eyes. He noticed things he had overlooked before. A teenager traveling alone who seemed nervous and disoriented. An elderly woman whose companion spoke for her whenever anyone asked questions. A young man with bruises on his arms that he tried to hide under long sleeves. Ethan did not know their stories. He did not know if any of them needed help, but he watched. He paid attention, and he promised himself that if he ever saw that signal again, he would not hesitate. 3 weeks after the incident, Ethan received a letter in the mail. It had no return address, just his name and home address written in careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short message. The letter was from Emily. She wrote that she was doing better, though she still had nightmares sometimes. She was living with her parents again, trying to figure out what to do next. She did not know if she would ever feel completely safe, but she was working on it. She wanted Ethan to know that she thought about him every day. She thought about the moment when he looked at her across the bus station, and she knew somehow that he had seen her. Not just looked at her, but actually seen her. She thought about how he didn't give up, even when everyone told him to walk away. She thought about his voice in the parking lot, telling her to make the signal again. She wrote that she had been invisible for 3 months. No one noticed her. No one cared. She was just another face in the crowd, another body to be used and discarded. But Ethan had noticed. Ethan had cared. And because of that, she was still alive. At the bottom of the letter, she had written one more line. "Thank you for believing me, even though I am an adult." Ethan read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his wallet, behind the photo of Lucy and the picture of Sarah that he still carried everywhere. He sat in his kitchen for a long time, looking at the 3 items together. His daughter, his wife. And now this letter from a stranger who was no longer a stranger. That night, he picked Lucy up from her after-school program and took her to get ice cream. They sat in a booth by the window, and Lucy told him about her day, about the book she was reading, about the friend who had shared her crayons during art class. Ethan listened to every word. He watched her face light up when she talked about the things she loved. He thought about how easily that light could be extinguished, how quickly someone could take it away. When they got home, he asked Lucy if she remembered the hand signal they had practiced together. She nodded and showed it to him, tucking her thumb into her palm and folding her fingers over it. Ethan smiled and told her she did it perfectly. He told her he hoped she would never need to use it. But if she ever did, someone would see. Someone would help. He would make sure of it. Lucy asked him why he was being so serious. Ethan pulled her into a hug and held her tight. He told her it was nothing. He told her he just loved her very much. And he told her that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was pay attention when everyone else looked away. The story of Ethan Carter and Emily did not make national news. There was no movie deal, no best-selling book, no viral moment that captured the public's attention. It was just one afternoon at a bus station, one man who noticed something wrong, one woman who asked for help in the only way she could. But for Emily, it was everything. And for Ethan, it was proof that the lessons we teach our children can ripple outward in ways we never expect. Danger does not disappear just because the victim is an adult. And courage sometimes begins with the simple act of not turning away.